This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. On the show, you'll hear from leading Australian business owners as they share the lessons they've learned building their companies. You'll learn from their successes as well as some of the challenges they faced along the way. We also talk to experts from a range of fields who share specialised techniques you can use to improve your business. I'm your host, Savan Tuna, and I'm a director at Alexander Spencer, and I'm really passionate about helping Australian businesses succeed. The business plan. It's such a vital part of growing your business. But once it's finished, what happens next? What do you do when the document is done and it's time to do what you've planned? Your business plan isn't a static document. It's a springboard. And in today's episode, Andrew Baxter, founder of 24 Hour Business Plan, will share why he believes your business plan is vital. 24 Hour Business Plan is a strategic consulting firm that provides everything business owners need to achieve their strategic planning results. In today's episode, you'll learn about the significance of having a business plan at the onset and gain insights into the challenges faced by small businesses in acquiring the expertise needed to create and implement one. And you'll hear Andrew emphasise the critical role of execution and the challenges associated with it. Let's dive in. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line today. And for those who don't know who you are, tell us a little about yourself.
I often say it's complicated. Look, I had a corporate career until about 6 years ago. I ran some of the largest advertising agency groups in the country, Ogilvy and Publicis. I mean, people will remember campaigns that we did at Ogilvy like Rhonda and Katut for AAMI. And for those that love getting their name on a can of Coke, that was also us on the side of the can of Coke. Publicis, we did some great global campaigns for the likes of Tiger Beer and others. So I had a terrific career in advertising, but about 5.5 years ago, I stepped into a board and advisory career. So now I sit on a number of boards. I'm chair of Australian Pork. I sit on an ASX-listed tech company. I'm on an old-fashioned friendly society called Foresters Financial that's really contemporising itself now. And I'm also on the board of Growth Ops, which is similar to what I used to be involved in, a group of advertising and digital companies in the region. I'm also a senior advisor to BGH Capital, the largest private equity firm in the country. And then I accidentally started a consulting business in my spare time, helping businesses do business planning. So in 3 years, we've done about 140 companies' business plans, from ASX 20 companies down to well-funded startups. So I'm doing a classic portfolio career, as they say.
I was going to say, you're doing a classic, I don't have time. How do you find the time to manage all of that?
When I look back at my corporate career, my last role, we had about 12 companies reporting through to me, about 1,000 people. And each of those companies, whether they be digital agencies or creative agencies or media agencies or whatever they might have been, they probably had 5 or 6 clients that all wanted to be able to pick the phone up to you and say, oh, hey, the team was out yesterday presenting a new website or a new ad campaign. And they would expect you as the CEO would know exactly what was going on. So in my mind, I used to have 12 general managers or MDs reporting to me that could walk into my office anytime and about 60 clients that could pick the phone up. So I used to say I used to have to juggle 70 things, and now I'm only juggling about 8 or 9. So that's really easy.
Oh, you've done well. So take it back further. You've obviously come to a very senior corporate position. You're consulting and board positions. Take us to early stages. What was the journey like? What degree did you do? How did you get into corporate world?
Yeah, look, I originally did, interestingly enough, I started doing a commerce degree at Monash University. When I left school, I went to Haileybury down there in Melbourne. And then I realised after a year that whilst I loved business, it was probably more the marketing side that was interesting to me as opposed to the accounting side. It did give me, for my future CEO roles, a year of doing accounting was probably put me in reasonable stead. But I switched to marketing also at Monash, and marketing was a relatively early practice then in the late 80s. I think when I went through Monash marketing, there was only 36 spots. And now I actually did a panel at Monash last year, and the dean was telling me there's now 750 spots for marketing a year. So it's certainly, as a profession, it's grown. So I did that, graduated during the 1990 recession, came out the other side, and it was really hard to get marketing jobs. In 1991, it was tough times, and I applied not just for marketing roles, but for sales roles as well, because I thought, well, I've just got to get into a good company, and whether that be in sales or marketing. And I was lucky enough to get a role at Gillette in sales. And Gillette's obviously part of Procter & Gamble now. And I spent 2 years in various sales roles there, really enjoyed myself. Before then switching into advertising, I ended up, my cousin was working at one of the advertising agencies. They'd won the Nintendo account. And as a 25-year-old, he said, you should come and try and be the account manager on Nintendo. So I went across to advertising. It was terrific. And the rest was history.
Wow, that's an interesting story. The marketing, I did my degree late 90s, so I was 97. There was definitely more than 36 at that time. I was at Monash as well.
Yeah.
But it has grown and grown rapidly over the years, and it's the lifeline of business now. And the digital world has just added another layer of elements to marketing. So it's an interesting one. But what we're interested in today is all about this new little business you've got. Tell us about 24-hour business plan, because all businesses need a plan, and without a plan, you can't execute. So tell us about this business, 24-hour business plan.
Yeah, look, we launched it about 3 years ago. I was constantly getting calls from old colleagues, old clients to come and help them with their strategic plans or their business plans. And what struck me was there really wasn't, if you Google it, there's a whole lot of templates out there. Most accounting firms will have a template for a business plan. Most banks, most governments will have a business plan template, but you really didn't have anyone with experience that you could step you through that. So I almost went back a step and went, what were the best business planning sessions I was ever involved in with my clients over the years? And I used to write little notes in the back of my notebooks. And I pieced together a framework that in a way I wished I'd had. I mean, I was a CEO for over a decade. And I worked for large multinational companies, and they were terrific, but they sort of were set in their ways with their templates. And I always was frustrated that I thought there might be a better way and a simpler way. So in a way, I took all of those learnings, I overlaid a bit of my old marketing background. And I thought, if you can develop business planning where you can almost story tell it and visualize it, and it's less pages, not more, I think part of the mistake we make is we think we have to show that we're super intelligent by writing really, really complicated business plans. But if you can't articulate that to your team and get them to buy in, it's a bit of a waste of time. So what we did, we developed the framework. We tried it on about 24 companies first before we launched it, just to make sure that we had things right. And what we do now, and it's called the 24-hour business plan because we do 4 6-hour sessions. So we just say, look, if you're a small business or a medium-sized business and you can get maybe the founders or your executive team locked away in a room for 4 lots of 6 hours, and that doesn't have to be 4 days in a row. In fact, we rarely do that. It might be a day this week, and in 2 weeks' time, we do another day. We will co-write the plan with you in the room. So we don't do any butcher's paper or post-it notes. I've got business school students that work for us. We type all the notes up in real time, and 5 minutes after we finish, we hand you the plan. So it's an immediate plan. There's a 14-slide summary deck that is designed that you can walk into your management meeting every month or your board meeting if you've got a board and use that to run the business. We still give you the 180-slide version, which we know most people won't ever look at again. It's too much, but it's been amazing. We've done 140 companies in 3 years. We've done 15 different industry verticals. As I've said, we've done as big a companies as divisions of NRMA right down to startups. So it's been a whirlwind. It's kept us really energized. When I say we, it started off with just me. It got too big too quick in a good way. And now I've got 20 other ex-CEOs like me who sit on boards, who are experienced ex-CEOs, and they've joined the business to help facilitate those sessions, which is amazing.
I love that the consultants are ex-CEOs, because in my world as an accountant, the small business clients that either don't have resources to access people like yourself or resourced enough to go and seek and educate themselves to do these things, we are generally the first people they come to. It's an area that I love. I love educating clients and helping them put together a strategic plan, but that's not our core business, right? It's not what we do. And this is an amazing service that you're providing. You're right. There are so many plans and templates. And I was thinking of AI and what AI means to you, and I will ask that later. But, there's so many resources. We can just get trapped with too much. And a business plan isn't rocket science. We're not trying to cure cancer, but there's just a lot of information and people get stuck into how to proceed. So, for our listeners, take us through the journey of a business plan and what are the things that you see are important to get started?
Well, first of all, I think for the listeners, don't be worried that you don't have one or you might not have done it for 10 years. So there was some research that came out in 2018 that showed that 4 in 5 Australian SMEs do not have a plan. So only 20% do. Funnily enough, of those 20% that do, 76% actually get to where they expected to get to. And there's some great stats that I think if you just write a plan down, you increase your likelihood of growing by 48%. So for us, we went back to the fundamentals. What does a business plan need to involve? Now, the first thing is you can't write a plan without understanding the market you're in. So for us, we look at what's the market context? What are the industry trends? What are the market trends, the headwinds, the tailwinds that you can play into? We do then say, well, who are your customers going to be over the next 3 to 5 years? They may be the same as who your customers are now. And then what do they need from a firm like you? So we just get all this written down into a real summary format. We then have a look at, I love going back a step and saying, what's the DNA of the organization? Why did this business start? Even if it's 100 years old, there's normally a reason why it started. And there's some real hints to where you might want to go as a business and the culture and the values that are core to the business. So we map that out quickly. We do a competitive analysis, but we've got a fun way of doing that, which is quite an interactive competitive. And then we, right at the end of that market context piece, we try and identify what truly are your differentiators, because it's really easy to say we're different. Now, I came from the advertising world where there's 9,000 registered advertising agencies in Australia. So if you just sit there and say, I'm an advertising agency, you're the same as 9,000 others. So we're always trying to figure out, why is it different? That's the first part we try and nail down, the market context. Then most strategies, longer term 3 to 5 year strategies, will have a couple of core elements. You need to put down your brand. What's the purpose of the company? Why does it exist? And then what normally happens is people say, well, if that's why it exists, give me some examples of how you've done that. So you want to capture those. You then want to nail down what your core offerings are. What are those revenue streams? And you then really want to set a vision for the business. Now, I'm a big believer in, most people will just set a financial target. We do need to set that, but you need to set some sort of emotional vision which the team want to follow you through for. It might be to be the best in the category, or the number one, or the fastest growing, or the best place to work, or whatever it might be. And then we need to tie in, well, what do we need to value in our team members to underpin that? And what culture do we want to have? So the challenge with most business plans, it's easy to fill in all those boxes, but to ladder it together into a story that you can explain to somebody at a barbecue when they say, what's your business all about? Who are you working for now? You can very quickly go bang, 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 bang. Then the final two parts we cover off, one is your growth plan. And, obviously coming back to the financials, I was once taught that there's only actually 5 ways to grow a business. And it's a really important thing for small business and medium-sized businesses owners to understand. There's business as usual. What are your current revenue streams? And are they going to grow or not grow over the next 3 to 5 years? The only other 4 ways to grow your business is to open in other markets. So if you currently operate in Melbourne, maybe you could operate in Sydney or Adelaide or Perth or New Zealand or Singapore. That's one way of growing your business. Another way is to just offer other, new products or services, right? You expand out your offering. The next way is to do a small acquisition. There's another firm, we're trying to get into that space. Why don't we look at bringing them in? And the final way, which is often forgotten, is to look at strategic partnerships. Who can we partner with that isn't a competitor, but we've both got similar databases? We might be able to, work with each other. We might be able to both make some money by doing that. So we map that out in a very visual way so that it's clear where the biggest opportunities are for your growth. So we cover all that in our first 2 sessions. That's really the 3 to 5 year plan, whatever time length that you're looking to do. And then we get very operational and executional. There's no point having a great plan and executing it badly. And funnily enough, there's no point having a bad plan and executing it well. So we then work through what I call the 8 pillars of executional excellence. They're in alphabetical order so that you can remember them. It's marketing. How good's your marketing? What needs to happen? If that's your 5-year plan, what needs to happen in year 1 for marketing? Then new business or sales, that's the N. O for operations. The P is your core product, so MNOP. There's no Q. The R is your relationships with either your customers or your clients. The S is those strategic partners that you're going to have to work closely with to make sure your business does well. And the T is for talent or team. I mean, all the people and culture sides of things, the development, the training of your team, how do you make them great performers? And my theory is if you get that right, the MNOP, marketing, new business, operations, product, the relationship with clients, the strategic partners in the team, the ultimate outcome of that's your financials. And normally if your business hasn't gone well for a year, one of those first 7 things or 2 of them might have just been a bit off. And the temptation when you start a business or you take a business over is to go, I'm going to turn the whole thing around on marketing, or I'm going to turn the whole thing around on people and culture. They're just one of 7 things you need to do. So we unpack all of those for the company based on that longer term plan, identify a whole lot of priorities. There's normally 35 to 50, and then we help them prioritize those down to 10 and write a 1-page action plan for each. So that's how we get to the sort of the summary document. So that's the stepping stones. I mean, I'm simply explaining it, but you don't want to get too much more complicated than that. You want to have your market context written on a page. You want to have your strategy written on a page. You want to have your growth plan written on a page, and you want to have the top 10 priorities in the first year written on a page. And then you want to have 10 one-page action plans. That's a good, simple, practical, and actionable plan.
I have to say, I'm visualizing these 4 6 hour sessions. And for businesses that haven't gone through the journey of doing one, especially the ones that are a bit dynamic and driven, would be so excited in those sessions if it's been taken through the way that you've described it there. You must get amazing opportunity to do ongoing consulting work because they'll be like, Andrew, this is awesome. Can you now help us? That must
Yeah.
happen so often.
It does happen quite a bit. Funny enough, we tend to have a lot of partners because we're all pretty busy doing what we're all doing. Look, occasionally we'll help execute, but otherwise we've got a whole series of partners that we'll recommend. It might be a supply chain issue, and we'll say, oh, look, there's a couple of supply chain experts and logistics companies that we recommend. Or it might be we really want to dive deeper on high performance teams, and we'll say, look, here's 3 people we'd recommend in that high performance team space. Obviously, with me as an ex-CEO and an ex-marketer, if it's around brand or some of those things, maybe occasionally I'll sneak in and help companies out. And we have got a second product called the 24-hour marketing plan because a lot of us were ex-marketers. And whilst we spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours of the 24 hours of the business plan on marketing, if people want to do a real deep dive into marketing, we've got a 24-hour version for that. But look, yes, there's a lot of exciting things that come off the back of it, and we're really pleased. And funnily enough, we're now recommending a lot of companies that have been through our program to each other. Recently, there's a great dashboarding company, a company that specializes in pulling out all of your data and turning them into automated dashboards. Now, we've recommended them in recent times to a couple of companies who have been really struggling to pull all their data together and get together. So it's really nice for us when we can put a couple of our organizations in touch with each other and find out later on that they're working together. So we're seeing a bit of that too.
Amazing. So, who do you have in the room? So, a business plan generally is designed by founders, CEOs, executive team, but is it really that team that you take through the 4 6 hour journey and then it's their job to bring the next layer of management in? Or do you bring in management, employees, a bit of research, or how do you get that engagement? Where does that fit in with your 24-hour plan?
Yeah, so look, we say at a minimum it needs to be your executive team. Because even if you're a smaller business and it might be 2 founders and a CFO or whatever it might be, I say at a minimum, we need all of you in the room to buy in. What we do find is a lot of organizations do want to bring that next layer of the management team in as well. And if you think about it, if they're going to be the ones that are executing this, you want them to also buy in. Some companies might have an advisor or a chairperson or a small board or a larger board, and sometimes they want to involve them as well. The other group that we encourage them to bring in is we say, who's your 1 or 2 high performers in the organization? They might be people in their 20s, but you can see that they've got a real future over the next 5 to 10 years in the organization. And funnily enough, they really help you with the culture because if they've seen what happens and they're out having lunch with a couple of their colleagues and explaining what's going on, not only is it great education from them personally, but it also helps push out the plan and the power of the plan to all of them. So at a minimum, the exec team, if you've got senior advisors, board members, bring them in. That next level management layer, if they're going to be crucial to delivering this plan, bring them in, and then some high performance. So I think 2's the minimum we've ever done this with. The maximum's been about 55. Now, that was a university where you've got a lot of stakeholders. So that was a pretty big room, and we sort of game it at that point where we have like 6 tables of 8 or 9, and we sort of work through our process, but sort of almost get them to compete with each other, which is a lot of fun. But usually there's 7 to 10 in the room, occasionally up to sort of 15 to 20. We recently worked with one of the biggest charities in the country, and they had about 20 in the room. And, they're a very sizable charitable organization. We worked with one of the big media owners, in the outdoor media space. They had about 20 in the room. But the average would be about 6, 7, 8, I would say.
And how long do you plan out for? So, business plans, a year, 2 years, 3 years. You can have a long-term vision. So take us through a business owner that says, okay, I'm going to try to do this myself. Are they thinking a year ahead, or are they thinking 4 years ahead, or is it the end goal? Is it what? How do they actually go through their thinking before they even put pen to paper?
So look, the most common for us would be a 3-year plan. There's quite a few 4 and 5-year plans. So that's the sort of range, because beyond that, it's hard to imagine. The world can change. The market you're operating in can change. what your customers need from an organization might change. When we work with some of the, I suppose, government type or government owned organizations, often they're encouraged at a government level to have longer term plans. It might be a 7 to 10 year plan. And that's fine because obviously governments are putting in a lot of infrastructure. It's large expenses and large investments. So we can go out to sort of 10 years if possible. I do often joke that not many people will probably still be around at the end of the 10-year plan. And you do want to get your team to buy into helping. It's a bit like in AFL terminology, you bring the right team together to win a premiership, and it doesn't normally happen in a year. It normally happens in 2 or 3 or 4 years. So you want to bring that team on that journey and get them to a point where that team can win and they've all worked together to win. So we definitely do that 3, 4, 5 years. But then we very much also help you deliver, well, what's the operational plan in year 1 to get you through that? Now, we're about to do our first client where they did a 4-year plan with us. They were one of our first clients 3 and a bit years ago. They're about to do their 4th 1-year plan within the 4-year plan. So each year we go back and help them learn from the first year's plan. What did you learn? What did you achieve? And then we help them build out the next year's top 10 priorities. So that's pretty exciting that we've got them coming up next month.
So is the engagement the 24-hour plan, and then once a year you sit down with your clients and do a mini little 1-year operational plan? Is that the engagement?
Yeah. So look, we say to people, just do the 4 6-hour sessions. If you want to get us back, we've got a 6-hour version in a year's time. And about half our clients come back to do that with us, which is a great sign. It's also really good for us because then we can see whether they've grown or improved as an organization. So we get a whole lot of great data points. And we know, depending on which data set we look at, the companies we've worked with have grown between 72 and 85% in the first year.
That is such a good result. It just shows we had our first episode, actually might have been our second episode, was with the founder of an amazing stationery business called My Goals. It was around goal setting. And when early on, you said, if you write down your goal, 48% likely will write down your business plan. It just goes back to that goal setting, writing it down, having a reason to get up and do it and knowing what that is. Because I think what's happened, what I see from our clients is if they don't write it down, they kind of don't know where they're going. They might in their head, but they wake up, if they've got kids, they're running around with kids, wife, get home. And the whirlwind of day-to-day just takes over. And if you haven't written it down, you don't even have a reason to get out of the whirlwind. I think as a starting point, what I see is if you have a plan, which you have in your head, just write it down. I don't care if you've have an MBA or have a degree or not. Let's just start with basics. And I think that's where I get really excited with our clients, because as soon as they start doing that, they realize how important actually stopping to work, we call it in the business, and working on trying to develop on the business stuff. It's amazing. And I'm getting so excited by this offering that you provide because it sounds really basic, 24-hour business plan. And you're like, these tools exist. No one uses it, but if you get it right, and then you have the support, the right support, I'm not surprised you get 72% growth in the first year after a plan's been done. So well done, and it's great to see the results. My question is a cheeky one because I'm an accountant, and you said you had a lot of marketers in the room. At one point, a business plan needs to convert into some numbers that you're trying to achieve. How important is mapping out what you want to try to achieve, and how does that look from a financial perspective?
Yeah, look, we focus obviously on that growth plan that I mentioned before, where we're trying to map out over, say, a 3-4 year period, what that growth might look like. And then we tend to break it back down to annual chunks about if you want to grow, I don't know, 50% over 3 years, then what does that look like? We certainly go through each of your revenue streams and try and identify where opportunities might be. If we overlay marketing or sales effort, what does that look like? Could it increase it? So we spend quite a bit of time on the financials. We probably don't spend as much time on cost-cutting initiatives. I mean, most good founders deep down and CEOs know how to save some money if they really need to go and do that. We've all been there and done that. We certainly provide our advice if we have a look, because they give us we always ask, we sign NDAs with all of our clients. They give us their last 2 or 3 years P&Ls, so we can have a look at that beforehand. We can have a look at their balance sheet to figure out whether they have got any money. We certainly talk about things like cash flow and how can they improve that might unlock opportunities. So all the things you'd expect, I suppose, all the tools in the armory over the years that I've been able to use, we pass on. And it depends on what category we're in. We've all got, as ex-CEOs, so many stories that just pop up. And all of a sudden, I might not have thought about that story for 5 years, but we'll be talking to someone in a certain industry. You know what? This has reminded me of something that one of my clients went through, or I went through 6-7 years ago. And here's the experience I had. And maybe that might be something. So I think the feedback we get from our sessions is that it almost aligns and focuses teams, but it's got the rigor behind it as well. We do dig into some of those financial metrics and try and figure out exactly and visualize how you can get there. Because at the end of the day, everybody's in business to make some money. And we want to make sure we're helping companies, even if it's a more incremental growth, how can we help them improve some margin through various techniques? So we're certainly digging into all of our experience to help our clients do that.
One of my favorite books that I've read early on in my career here at the accounting firm was a business book called Four Disciplines of Execution. And I'm part of the growth faculty. And when the author came to Melbourne, I went to the workshops. And I just love that part of business plans, the execution part. I totally agree with you. You need to have a plan. But how many of your 140 clients do you see going, geez, they had the plan, da 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 da? Because in the book, Four Disciplines of Execution, I'm sure you know about it. He really talks about everyone knows how to write a plan. There's so many tools out there and, you can give it a crack. But what a lot of businesses fail is they don't execute well because they might get stuck into the whirlwind of your day to day or whatever it might be. How do you assist clients to ensure that the execution's done? And what do you think is the critical part for business owners once they have a plan to execute?
We try and help during the sessions to set up a bit of a rhythm of business around these plans, to say that you should be catching up with your team at least once a month at a top level. You need to do more deep dives at a quarterly review, like lock away 3 hours. You spent a little bit of time and investment to get everyone in the room to come up with this plan. You actually want to go through it more formally. And at that point, we say, look, if you want to get us back in to do those quarterly reviews with you, we can. They're like little 3-hour sessions that we do, but they should be something that a CEO can run themselves. But sometimes in a way, they know that they're going to get caught up in the day-to-day. So they say, actually, no, let's block in those quarterly reviews with you because we know that if you're coming, we're going to make sure we've done some work. So we do offer that as a service for those that do want us to come and check in. I mean, we're often emailing out to our clients just to find out how they're going and how the plan's kicking in. We're often inviting them to events that we might run or things like that. So we're sort of hearing along the way. We've only had a couple. We had one put up his hand early days, and because we tend to write to everybody at least once a year to say, oh, hey, do you want us to pop back in and help you do a year 2 plan? And he basically said, look, I've been hopeless. I've done nothing, and it was a decent sized business. And he said, I just got caught up in everything. It was just me. I had to make a lot of change. And so we went back and helped them do a reset session. And then one of our other ex-CEOs then sort of for the next 2 or 3 months basically did a couple of hours. Because once they're in the rhythm of working with a program like this, then you're off and running. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to give you all the tools to be able to do it yourself, but we're around if you need us. And I joke that what you said earlier, we are a consulting firm, but I joke we're a consulting firm full of people that aren't consultants. We're ex-CEOs who are pretty practical. We've been there and done that. We don't want to waste people's time. We're more inclined to be doing less is more.
And I love that. Again, I'm going to go back to, I love that you are ex-CEOs. I don't know what companies you were CEOs of in terms of the rest of the team, but to access that level of knowledge is really hard to get. But there's so many business coaches around, but I feel like anyone can be a business coach. For anyone that thinks they've run a business, thinks they're a business coach. But when you're a CEO and you've been as CEO of an organization, it takes education, it takes lots of hours, lots of wins and losses to get to that level. So I really value the fact that you've built a team of high-end ex-CEOs, because I cringe when clients tell me that they've hired a business coach. None of my clients generally do, because we kind of bridge the gap that they don't need to. And I feel offended if a client actually even went down that path. But I love the team you've built. Before we go, I could talk about for hours. I've got about another 15 questions. We do have to wrap it up, but I'm going to keep going and see how we go. And hopefully our listeners stay on this journey. How much does it cost? It sounds like there's a lot of effort that goes in. If an SME came to you to run that program, 24 hours, what's the cost?
So our standard cost of purely off the shelf as we run it's $24,000. It's an investment for people. Depending on where the business is at, we're happy to chat to companies about the price and the way we run it. Like obviously, if we stagger the sessions over, say, 2 or 3 months, it's a bit easier from a cash flow point of view to some. I mean, some of the big companies that we work with think that's too cheap. So it depends, but it's a bit of a kitsch price point because of where we're at. But we certainly have other modules for not-for-profits. We've got a slightly discounted rate. We've actually got a partner in the not-for-profit space who do some matching funding so that it brings down the price. It's a group of individuals that want to upskill not-for-profits from a business and admin point of view, so they're not wasting money on business admin. They're actually putting as much money as possible into that charity. So they're a great company. That brings the price right down for not-for-profits. So if for any not-for-profits that might be listening, it's a pretty advantageous way to go about it. So look, we're certainly open to having conversations with people. Sometimes it's a bit more complex. Sometimes the bigger companies will want us to do some stakeholder interviews beforehand, run some workshops before we actually get into the session. So obviously we've got modules that add on to that standard price. Some people want us afterwards to help them write a beautifully designed booklet of how it all works. But just the 4-hour session bit is what that initial price is for. So, when you think about the growth that it can unlock, even if you're a company doing $1 million to $1.5 million, if it's unlocking growth, it pays for itself pretty quick.
Definitely does. Now, we love storytelling on our podcast. I'd love for you to share a success story of an SME, the smaller, maybe the better, on how you took them through the journey and they came back and said, Andrew, if it wasn't for this, I would not be here. Can you tell us a little story that can enlighten our listeners to actually get up, if they don't use your services, to actually do some research and do a plan?
The one I'm thinking about when you're asking, there's probably a couple that come to mind, and I know he won't mind me mentioning this, and he's actually on video for us, and we're about to pop him up on our website, so I know I'm not going to get in trouble by saying it's a great professional services business called Loyalty and Reward Co. They specialize in building loyalty programs for companies all around the world. When we started working with Phil and his team, they had probably 10, 12 in their team, so, a classic SME. And we're probably about 6 or 7 years old at that point in time. And they were starting to do some work with some bigger companies, but they probably just needed to get a plan down to give them the confidence to go to the next stage. Because a lot of the companies we work with have done really well to a point, and then they flatten off a bit, and they're not quite sure how to get to the next stage of growth. And with their team, I think we worked a lot with them around, their offer and how the go-to-market, and a clear articulation of the model was. We actually worked a lot with them on pricing and how pricing might unlock growth. In their case, they certainly wanted to internationally expand, and they've recently opened offices in London and New York for clients over there. So, he's given us some really nice shout outs on LinkedIn along the way, unprompted from us about that. And then I've got an ongoing relationship where I, do a bit of that guidance on an ongoing basis, almost like an executive coach type role with him. And we go back and we do our quarterly reviews. He's very disciplined in getting us back every quarter. We've done the second 1-year plan for them. So it's a real success story. They've almost doubled in size since we've worked with them over the last sort of 2.5 years. So it's a great story of how somebody, put their hand up and said, hey, you know what, this will be worthwhile for myself and my team. And they really lent into it and have really driven their business off the back of it. So good story.
Well, like I said, we could talk for hours, but unfortunately our time is up. I know that you've definitely inspired our listeners, because I'm slightly inspired. We have a plan, but I feel like it's not in a nice little document. So we need to work on that. But definitely you've inspired our listeners to go out and do a plan. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I know that our listeners will too as well. I want to thank you so much for your time, Andrew. And I wish you all the best with this 24-hour business plan. It's only a short 3 years that you've been around, but I know that you're doing great things. And if Australian businesses are doing better, it's only better for everyone else. So thank you for giving back to the community, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
This is The Bottom Line, a show designed to help Australian businesses succeed. This podcast was produced by accountancy firm Alexander Spencer. At Alexander Spencer, we've been helping business owners realise their goals since 1952. And we play a pivotal role in developing, implementing, and supervising the business goals and strategies of our clients. To find out how we can help your business succeed, head to our website, alexanderspencer.com.au. To make sure you don't miss an episode of The Bottom Line, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Savan Tuna, and we'll be back next episode with more tips to help you transform your business. And that's the bottom line.